So I've titled it Asking for a Friend, Real Questions, Honest Answers, Biblical Truth, right? And so what I'm trying to do during this is help us understand something that is ancient, I guess, for lack of a better word. So we're going to look at a passage today that's 3,000 years old. And what I would like you to do is consider that what was said 3,000 years ago and what a lot of the ancients kind of took for granted, and a lot of ancient wisdom said, this is where meaning and value are found, is really opposite of where we are today in 2025 America. And I'm like, if you know me, if you've been around a while, like I'm not like just about like beating up culture or beating up America. Like I'm not doing that. It's just really healthy to be aware of the culture that we live in, the messages that we're given for like identity and purpose and value and meaning, and like what we're told to chase to find those things as compared to what I'm about to present to you today in something that was written 3,000 years ago. It's intense. So here's my opening salvo. Here's my opening question for you just to get us all thinking in the same direction. Why is it, regardless of stage of life, why is it that when we talk about purpose and identity, meaning we could sneak in there, in the direction of your life, why can that be so paralyzing? Right? Because it affects us. It affects you as a teenager. When you think about your identity, I mean, that's when it's like you're most aware of it, right? When you're really starting to come into who am I, what's my purpose, what's my value, where am I headed in life? So you can have these like existential crises at that stage, and it can be paralyzing. I talk to teenagers, I talk to young adults. It's like, oh my gosh, where am I going? What am I doing, right? But then it can also be you're middle-aged, you got a great job, you're floating through life, you got kids, you're busy, you're doing stuff. Asking these questions can be paralyzing even later in life, when now all of a sudden you're an empty nester or you're a retiree. So like, who am I? Where am I going? When a life stage ends and all of a sudden you find yourself in a different life stage, it's like, okay, the thing that I used to identify myself by doesn't matter anymore. Or the things that I think identify me and give me purpose just fell apart. Like, what do I do then? So that's what I'm trying to get at this morning, and that's what Solomon in this book that we're going to be looking at this morning, because remember, the Bible is made up of 66 books. It's not actually just one big book. It's 66 books put together. And so he's going to help us think through some of these things of like, why can I go through all these stages, do all these really actually good things, and still feel empty? Like, why can I do all this stuff and still feel empty? That's what Solomon wrestles with. And when I started you off this morning, Brittany didn't pick out this incredibly depressing verse. I did. Everything is meaningless. Now, the whole book of Ecclesiastes, so there's only 12 chapters, right? And so this is where it ends. And if this was the only point of Ecclesiastes, man, it's depressing. It's like, man, what are we doing here? But there's got to be an unless, right? Because without the unless, this book is like, wow, and this life is yikes. Right? So here's what he's saying. Here's what Solomon is trying to get at in this book. He's essentially saying the things that we think that will give us purpose, the things that we think that will give us identity and direction can end up feeling very meaningless. And this is like a very personal thing. Like, I'm not just preaching at you this morning. I'm in the journey with you. There's been several things in my life where I thought I found identity in, and then they ended. Or it turned out that they didn't give me the meaning and the value and the purpose and the direction I thought that they would. And so the challenge I'm offering you this morning is to think about that. Regardless of what stage, if you're a teenager in school, if you're a young adult, if you're later in life, like you're later in life, whatever it is, like what is it that you're like, okay, I'm going to find purpose in this. This is going to give me identity. And I also would like you to wrestle with the things that you put your hope in and they still let you down. They left you feeling empty. Like that's the rub. That's like what's cool about this. So the bottom line, right up front, the bottom line of what I'm trying to say this morning is real purpose is grounded in what lasts. So I'm basically just going to spend this morning through the book of Ecclesiastes just trying to mix that bowl up with you and just trying to help us think through what does this ancient wisdom look like today in 2025, 3,000 years after it was written. So to do that, just as a reminder, in case you weren't here last week, you don't remember, last week I said, okay, I'm going to introduce all these questions during this series. And if I'm going to stand up here and say, I think you can go to the Bible and find the most satisfying answers for these questions, I want you to know that the Bible is actually true and trustworthy, right? That it's like something I can lean into with life's biggest questions. And so what I said last week essentially was that the Bible is evidence that God is real and he is trustworthy, and his love for you is evidence in the gospel of Jesus Christ. Like, if nothing else, when you read the Bible, when you look at the Bible, yes, some of the stuff can be like, I don't, what's going on here? What's happening here? What does that mean? It's culturally different. I get it. But to understand, though, that God is saying, look, I'm in real history. That's why I went into archaeology last week. It's why I went into manuscript evidence last week. It's why I dipped into prophecy just a little bit last week. It's why I talked about the eyewitness accounts last week. It's grounded in real history, but the point is to get to Jesus Christ. So as a reminder, your Bible, 2/3 of it is before Jesus shows up to earth. That's the Old Testament. A small sliver of it, 4 books, right there kind of in the middle, is about Jesus. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And everything after that is like, well, what happened after Jesus left? Like, how did Christianity begin? How did it spread? What are the main teachings of Christianity? But it's all oriented toward that middle part there where Jesus shows up. That's what it's all about. And so to know that the Bible is trustworthy goes beyond just these questions I'm going to try to answer. It goes to the fact that Jesus is real and he loves you. And he gives you freedom now, what we're going to talk about today, but it's like an eternal thing. So I just want to make sure like we're tracking in the same direction here. But today, so I'll take all that today to answer this question, purpose. Why am I here? So that's our big question for today that I think is a really timely question for where we are today in our society. And again, so Ecclesiastes, what is that book? It's in your Old Testament. It's one of several ancient wisdom books found in your Old Testament. And it's a particular kind of writing because it's ancient wisdom writing. Ecclesiastes was written by King Solomon, a wicked smart guy, and he is a king. He's wealthy, he's influential, and he's looking back on his life, and he's saying to us, hey, so I've tried it all, I've done it all, I've seen it all, and here's what I've learned. Here's the hard-fought, hard-won lessons that I have learned that I want to share with you. It was written in Hebrew. That's most of your Old Testament, 95% of it. And it was written to people that are gathered. Ecclesiastes, even though it was written in Hebrew, is actually a Greek word that means one who gathers an assembly, right? Ecclesia is church, assembly. Like that's where we get going to church. You're going to the ecclesia. We're a gathered assembly. So he's gathering people to hear his wisdom at the end of his life as he looks back to share it. So that's kind of what we're doing here this morning together, is we're gathered together as the church, as the ecclesia, to hear the wisdom of God, right? That's what's going on. That's what's happening this morning. And the message of the whole book, I'd love for you to read the whole book. I'm only going to hit like a couple of places all the way throughout it. But essentially, view life's pleasures as temporary, not as anchors for your purpose, for your identity, or for the direction of your life. Like, we should be able to enjoy the good things that God has given us. And I'm not talking about like, oh man, Pastor Kyle said I can just live in sin and I should enjoy it. No, that's not what I'm saying. But God has given us a lot of great things in this life. Work, rest, friends, achievements, even your wealth, wine. Like, these are all different like little pleasures of life. But if you take them too far, all of them will leave you feeling empty. And some of them can even turn into outright sin. So what Solomon is saying is like, enjoy these things. And this whole book is like, well, how do I do that? How do I not find my identity in like these temporary things that a lot of them change with the stage of life that I'm in? How do we do that, Solomon? Is it just miserable and life is worthless and empty and meaningless? Or is there something more? So again, the bottom line that I'm trying to say this morning, real purpose, we got to ground it in something that lasts, not just something that will change. So, Ecclesiastes chapter 1. How does this really intelligent guy set up his argument that he's going to make for essentially 12 chapters? So what he gets into in chapter 1 is he says, look, if you look, he starts from a natural perspective. Like, nothing is satisfied. Like, that's kind of the problem. So rivers flow into the ocean. Is the ocean ever like, all right, that's about it. That's all I need? Solomon says, no. Your hearing, right? You don't want your own hearing to just be like one day, nope, I think I've heard enough. I'm out of here, right? Some people are like, what? Your eyesight, Solomon says, same way. Like, it's never satisfied. So he kind of goes through all these things and he says, look, this is kind of the beauty of creation, but it's also the difficulty. Is nothing is ever satisfied, including you, including the things that you'll want, including your own heart, your desires. Like, none of that stuff will be fulfilled ever. So he wrestles with, he says, well, what do we do then? If it's like this stream that like always has to run, what do we do with that? And so the caution that he offers in chapter 1, as he's setting this whole argument up, is this. He says, look, if you build your identity on temporary things, it's always going to collapse. Because it's just, again, it's that all-consuming fire that can never be satisfied completely or put out. Desire, right? Now, we're not trying to get rid of desire. Desire is a good thing. This is just a cautionary tale, this book. All right? So real purpose, again, real purpose, what is he saying? Is grounded in things that are going to last. So, Ecclesiastes 1:14. This is the summation of his argument as he begins it. And it could be very depressing if the book ended on this verse. He says, I have seen all things that are done under the sun. That's a huge idea for Ecclesiastes. 30 times he says that phrase. And have found everything to be futile, a pursuit of the wind, 9 times. That's also another very famous part of this book. Everything is a pursuit of the wind. Now, it's important to understand what he's talking about here, and we're going to unpack those 2 ideas. But essentially, I just want you to think about the things that we chase under the sun. And if you were to chase something that didn't make any difference and you wanted to look dumb, like go outside and start chasing the wind. Like it's cute when you're 5, but if you're 40, it's like, yee, what's going on with that guy? Right? Like you don't want to chase the wind anymore, right? And so that's what Solomon is saying. Like you need to get to a stage of life where you're like, okay, like I'm going to pursue the things that matter. I'm not running out there with a plastic bag trying to catch the wind anymore. Like I'm not going to build my life on that kind of silliness, right? So that's kind of what we're getting at. So that's kind of the basis of the argument that he's making. Then he transitions into chapter 2 and he says, look, and I'll prove it to you. I know this to be true because of what I've done with my own life, the damage that I've done in my own life. And if you know the story of Solomon, he had all the potential in the world and he ends up wrecking his life. Smartest guy in the Bible, right, other than Jesus, richest and most influential and powerful king in the Old Testament, and yet his story doesn't end well. And so this is the guy that's looking back and he's saying, please listen to me. This is what I've learned. You don't need to touch the stove to learn that it's hot. Okay? So the emptiness of pleasures and possessions. Now that's what he gets into. So listen to what he says. He says, verse 1 of chapter 2, I said to myself, self, go ahead. I'll test you with pleasure. Enjoy what is good. But it turned out to be futile. So he's saying, this is the setup for the things that he's tried. He's saying, look, I thought that I could find purpose, identity, value, meaning, direction. I thought I could find those things and just having good times. In pleasure. This is 3,000 years old, and today we live in a culture obsessed with pleasure. Obsessed with it. And comfort, and ease, and stuff. That's why this is so relevant today. Verse 2, well, how did he do that? What did he do? Well, I said about laughter, it's madness. And about pleasure, what does this accomplish? Again, here we are all these years later, and we're still trying to just find happiness in laughter and having good times, and we want to like build our life around that. It's why so many of us, like I can't keep up with all the recommendations I get for shows to watch. It's like you got Netflix and Apple and Prime and Paramount, and I got like every week somebody telling me, oh, this show, it's so hilarious, you got to watch this. And I'm just like, there's only 24 hours in a day. Like, what am I going to do, right? And so it's like, but we all do, like we have these lists of shows that we watch, and then we all tell ourselves that lie, just one more episode, and then it's like 2 a.m., right? And we are literally entertaining ourselves to death. Like this is a big problem for us in the developed world is we have so much, and these are the kinds of things that we're trying to find peace and happiness and pleasure in. And it's like, and they just keep leaving us empty because they're so mean, they leave cliffhangers at the end of every episode. And it's like, and we're just chasing. It's like chasing the next episode, trying to find happiness in this life. 3,000 years ago, it was the same issue. We're just doing it differently now. It just looks a little bit different. Then he says, verse 3, I explored with my mind. So he's going to take all of his wisdom and he's going to explore the pool of wine on his body. Can I find happiness, meaning, value, purpose, direction? Can I find these things in wine, in having a good time? So something that is okay, but he's exploring, can I find meaning in it? So he's not going off the deep end and becoming a drunkard because he says, look, my mind still guided the process. However, he says, next part of the verse, he wanted to see if he could grasp folly. He's looking at other people and they seem to be living it up. Can I find meaning and value and happiness in that? Until I could see what is good for people to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. So he's trying to pursue these things. And here's the rub. Here's the difficulty. We've got such limited time here on earth. That's why the search is so important. That's why the answer to this question of like, can I find purpose and meaning? It's why it's so important, because we got such a short window. If you live to be 100 years old, man, that's like, wow. At your funeral, they'd be like, man, they were so old. They saw so much in their lifetime. But it's 100 years. You look at buildings here in New England, right? Here in New England, we pride ourselves. Like, man, we're awesome here. We got the Old North Church. What do you got? Right? We got buildings that were built before the country existed. What do you got? Then you go to Europe and they're like, man, we got buildings that are like 2,000 years old. What do you got? And we're like, well, we won World War II, so what's up? Right? It's like we're not, like our scope of time is so short, man. And so that's the difficulty of this book. And that's what he's prodding us with. Don't waste your life with your plastic bag chasing the wind over things that don't matter. So what did he do? Well, some other stuff. I tried pleasure, verse 4. I also tried to increase my achievements. And I built houses, and I planted vineyards for myself. Verse 8, skipping ahead. I also amassed silver. I became like Jeff Bezos rich, right? And the treasure of kings and provinces. I did all that. I gathered male and female singers for myself. And from a guy's perspective back then, many concubines. He had a bunch of wives, the delights of men. Anything and everything he thought he could do. Verse 10. All my eyes desired, I did not deny them. I did not refuse myself any pleasure, for I took pleasure in all my struggles. So he says that, looking back on his life, and he's like, but here's where I land, verse 11 of chapter 2. When I considered all that I had accomplished and what I had labored to achieve, I found everything to be futile in a pursuit of the wind. All I was doing was running around outside with a bag, and I looked inside, and there was nothing in it. And then he ends that by saying there was nothing to be gained, again, that phrase, under the sun. So here's what Solomon's saying. Here's his advice for us. Here's the takeaway. He says, if you want purpose, be wise and reject under the sun thinking. So this phrase here, under the sun, isn't just like a biblical idea necessarily. This is kind of like an ancient wisdom idea. And again, it smacks against what we believe in the 21st century. The path that we're given to identity, purpose, meaning, value, direction largely has to do with nobody but us and our happiness and our pleasure and what we want out of life. It's why we have so many of the problems that we do. We're becoming hyper-focused and hyper-selfish, and it's leaving us feeling completely empty. Completely empty. I believe that's partly what's happening with like this revival that's happening in America right now. There's this quiet revival happening right now because I think a lot of us realize, man, we've been sold this pill, this snake oil now for decades, that if you want to be happy, just chase the American dream, which has really just become get everything that you can, get what's yours. That's under the sun thinking. That's short-sighted. It's selfish, and it's going to leave us empty. And I just honestly believe that's kind of what's happening to us, and we're feeling it on a national level, which is interesting. So Solomon says, again, not just a biblical idea, but kind of an ancient wisdom idea. And so I want you to hear a couple different perspectives this morning of people today that are literally at the top of their game, that have accomplished everything worldly that you could want, and I want you to hear their perspective on what they think about under the sun thinking. So I want to introduce you first to Scotty Scheffler. If you know this guy, he's a golfer. He's the number one golfer in the world right now. And since 2022, the Phoenix Open, he has won 19 times. This guy is approaching Tiger Woods level status, if you know Tiger Woods. And he's asked at a news conference, because he's talking about how golf doesn't really satisfy. Winning doesn't really satisfy. And he's literally the best at it that you can be right now. And so a reporter asks this really important question. What do you find fulfilling, if not golf success? And his answer is awesome. I saw this a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, man, this is perfect. Thanks, Scotty, for saying this, because, man, I was doing this sermon, so this works out well for me. So here's what Scotty Scheffler says in response to that question.
At the end of the day, it's like, I'm not out here to inspire the next generation of golfers. I'm not here to inspire somebody else to be the best player in the world, because what's the point? You know, this is not a fulfilling life. It's fulfilling from the sense of accomplishment, but it's not fulfilling from a sense of like the deepest, places of your heart. There's a lot of people that make it to what they thought was going to fulfill them in life, and then you get there and all of a sudden you get to number one in the world, and then they're like, what's the point? And I really do believe that, because what is the point? You're like, why do I want to win this tournament so bad? That's something that I wrestle with on a daily basis. That's why I talk about families being my priority, because it really is. I'm blessed to be able to come out here and play golf, but if my golf ever started affecting my home life, or it ever affected the relationship I have with my wife or with my son, that's going to be the last day that I play out here for a living. This is not the be all end all. This is not the most important thing in my life. And that's why I wrestle with, why is this so important to me? Because, I would much rather be a great father than I would be a great golfer. That at the end of the day, that's what's more important to me.
Pretty well said. And a good question, I think, right there. Why is this so important to me? So when you look at your life and you think that you have some things that define you right now, maybe it's your job, your kids, your income, your house, your neighborhood, your car, I don't know, whatever it is, right? Like, why is this so important to me? And what would happen to my identity if I lost it? Who would I be without this? I asked Pastor Dean that when he retired. I was like, who's Pastor Dean now? He's a founding pastor of our church. He's pastored for like 187 years. And it's like, right, like, yeah, or so, give or take, several decades. But I asked him, I said, when you first retired, did you know who you were still? And he said, I did, because I knew my identity wasn't in being a pastor. It's a huge part of his life, obviously. But he said, I'm a child of God. Like, that's who it always had to be, like, through his whole career, because it has to be tied to something other than temporary and what we do. And so I think he did a good job there. Now, where did that come from for Scotty? Like, to know a little bit more about him, he's also a follower of Christ, and he's very open about his faith and how that defines his life. It defines about what he thinks is important in his life. And so it's just interesting to see that's how it comes out. When I say that Jesus gives freedom, that's what I'm talking about. That's a guy that knows he's gotten to the top, and he's like, look, if this all disappeared, man, this is not who I am. Like, you got to know that ahead of time, not when it happens, right? And this isn't just for famous athletes. So here you go, for everybody. So we'll touch a little bit of, like, everybody's lives in this room here. So if you're a student, your identity, your purpose, direction can be defined by school, obviously. If you play sports, it can be that, or it can be relational achievements. Now, what happens if you're in school and you don't do well academically, you don't make the sports team, or your relationships are a mess? Anybody that's ever been in school can raise their hand and say, I've been in that situation. I've been in that position where what was really important to me and I thought I identified by, all of a sudden fell apart and it wasn't real. And there's a lot of different things at that stage of life that can do that to us. So it's like, what do I find my identity in? What do I invest my life in? Then you go to young adult stage. This is very jarring, right? If you graduate and you go right into work, it's like your whole life is just different all of a sudden. If you go to college, it's very different. Then you graduate from college and people are like, okay, it's time to grow up, go get a job. And you're like, well, it can be very unnerving. And then dating game, man. Like, I pray for our young adults. Like, it's a different game out there. It's tough. It is very tough dating in a digital environment. And it's just like, again, these things that we identify by that drive us, if we find meaning in just these things, you get a little bit older. How about that? You're a working adult. You got a job. You got a paycheck maybe you're trying to bump up. You got keeping up appearances perhaps. You got kids. You got all these things. At this stage of life, you're always saying basically, next weekend things will slow down for the rest of your life until you die, right? Like, that's what's going on. You're busy. You're in a rut sometimes. It's like, and what about if you find your identity in your career, in your paycheck, in the way that you're keeping up appearances, maybe your kids? This is the next problem. For those of us that find our identity and our purpose in this little group here, when we transition to this next stage of life, being either an empty nester or a retiree, I've seen some people get really lost. Really lost. Because all of a sudden, for example, their kids move out and they look at their spouse and they're like, oh, hey, what was your name again? Because your whole life, your identity and your purpose was wrapped up in solely your children. And there's nothing there when they leave the house. Or all of a sudden your job goes away, like I asked Pastor Dean, and your identity, your purpose, the direction of your life is gone. It's why these transitions are so hard, because again, we're finding meaning and value and purpose and direction all in the wrong things. Because they're temporary and they're tied to the stage of life that you're in. Real world stuff that Ecclesiastes is forcing us to look at. So you can choose one of two ways, is what Ecclesiastes says, based on all this stuff. You can choose like a very temporary view and path, or you can like take one that's a little bit longer range. So living in light, here's what he's saying, like living in light of eternity leads to purpose, identity, and direction. It causes you to think differently. It causes you to project out what's important way further than just like, okay, I need to make sure I have this, or I do this, or I accomplish this. Your direction of your life is completely different. Whereas under the sun, what Solomon is saying, His verdict is it's all meaningless. It's a chasing after the wind because it's going to end. So when we started off with that depressing verse, it's all meaningless, there has to be an unless. And the unless for Solomon and for us is in his final word in chapter 12. So here's how he lands the plane. I basically skipped the whole book, but Ecclesiastes 12, listen to this. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. And then the next several verses, basically he says, before you get old and everything you thought that was important sadly fades away. He's telling his own story. He's warning us as he looks back as an old man and he's like, look, while you're still young, remember your Creator. Because if you don't, your whole life is going to pass you by and you're going to invest in things that don't matter. All of that is going to fade away. And Solomon is telling his own story. Even his own virility as a man is fading him. And he's like, and what do I have left? This book is a cautionary tale of a guy who's lived through it and is trying to get us to understand. God is speaking through the mistakes of this guy to help us understand, how do I prevent my life from being meaningless? And here's how he lands the plane. He says, when all has been heard, the conclusion of the matter is this: fear God and keep his commands, because this is for all humanity. For God will bring, verse 14, for God will bring every act to judgment, including every hidden thing, whether good or evil. So he's saying, fear God, follow his commands. Like, I want to orient my life long range. I want to keep like a good perspective with God. I am not God. He is. And so I want to have that good, healthy fear and say, Lord, so I want to trust you. I want to look to your word for answers to the deepest questions that my soul can come up with. And because of that, I'm going to look at your word and I'm going to live my life in such a way that one day when I meet you, God, I'm going to be able to give a good account of my life. That's long-range thinking. That's living my life in such a way that I want to invest not just in future generations, but I want to invest in eternity. And that's like the heaviness. That's like the of this whole book is like, God, we're going to stand before God and give an account for, did I live under the sun or did I live in light of eternity? And so what Solomon is driving home here, identity, purpose, and direction are found in those three things: fearing God, keeping his commands, living in light of eternity. Because here's the good news for you, everybody. Here's the good news. When we say, well, how do I not get so caught up in the temporary? Like, can I not enjoy anything? Do I just need to go live in a hole and become a monk and sell everything? Like, maybe, I don't know, but I'm not saying you have to do that. It says, living in light of eternity. This is the message of Solomon. Living in light of eternity, having a correct perspective, allows me to properly enjoy the temporary pleasures that God has given me instead of trying to find my identity in them. Like, that's what that perspective will do for you. Because if you don't, you'll wreck yourself financially, for example, and you'll always be miserable. You'll always be stressed out. You'll never be able to be generous. You'll never be able to be kind. You'll never, like with your time, with your money. And if you're always hustling and working more because you need more things, you're not going to have time for your family. I talk to a lot of guys and they're like, oh, I'm working all these hours. I got 2 jobs. Like, well, why? Well, because, they want to go on vacation. They want this, they want this, they want this. And I always push back. I'm like, I bet they want their dad way more than they want that stuff. It's 21st century thinking, though. If I want to be a good dad, I just need to kill myself. I'm never going to be there, but my kids are going to have all kinds of good stuff. I bet your wife would rather have a husband, and I bet your kids would rather have a dad. So it helps us think about time and money, energy, the things that we think are important. I know with most successful guys, the things that they think are important, nobody cares about. I've talked to some pretty successful people and read about very successful people, especially end of life, and they get there and they're just like, oh man, nobody cared about that. All those businesses I started, all the ladders I climbed, all the money that I made, all the stuff I built, everything that I did, nobody cares. Ultimately, it's like, who's that man? Who is that woman? Who's that person? It gives us a better perspective. So here's where Jesus comes in. And I just want you to hear just a couple of verses about him. This is the connection. When we talk about doing baptism, we talk about becoming new. We talk about reorienting our priorities and not having to do it just on my own through gritting my teeth. Here's what Jesus says about this equation. A thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. Like the enemy, Satan, right? It's like evil, just wants to eat you up. And Jesus says, no, there's a different way. I've come that you may have life and have it in abundance. Both this life and the next, Jesus talks about. And then the Apostle Paul, kind of bouncing off of that, he says, look, Just like Solomon says, if you've been raised with Christ, seek the things above, where Christ is. Keep your eyes on him, in other words, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind, verse 2, on things above, not on earthly things, right? The temporary things, the things under the sun. For you died, and your life is hidden with Christ, right? You died to all that. We live in a world that says if you want meaning and identity, value, and purpose, then you're going to get more likes, more follows, more stuff, more influence, more money, better vacations, whatever. And we sing a song, last verse about Jesus. We sing a song about this, John 8. So if the Son sets you free, you will really be free. Who the Son sets free, right? That song. Who knows it? Brittany. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm not singing. I'm not doing like what you did. No, I'm not going to happen. Not going to happen. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. Ecclesiastes, though. So the thread, the tie together. Let's tie this bow up. Everything is meaningless unless your identity is anchored in the God who made you, loves you, and redeems you through Jesus Christ. That is meaning. That's long-range thinking. That's investing in things that matter. And so Solomon essentially is saying, if you want purpose, or if you want an identity that can't be stripped away because of your stage of life, anchor it in God, not in the shifting stages of your life. It's got to be grounded in something different. And that's the ancient wisdom that God has given us. Again, our bottom line, real purpose is grounded in what lasts. So one more story. I told you I wanted to share a couple of stories of people that are at the top of their game, top of the world, so to speak, of accomplishments, and then the lessons they've learned. So there's this guy. He plays in the NFL, Jared Allen, and played, I should say, in the NFL, and he just recently was inducted into the Hall of Fame, the Football Hall of Fame. Now, he gives one of the best acceptance speeches ever. It's like 15 minutes long, and I didn't really watch the rest of it, but I saw this part, and I was like, man, this nails it on the head. This is what Solomon was saying. This is the wisdom of that book that another follower of Jesus at the pinnacle of his career is echoing. So watch what Jared Allen says. First to his wife, real quick, and then to his daughters. He's speaking to his daughters specifically.
And I love you more than life itself. To my amazing daughters, Brindley and Lakeland, through this process, the word legacy has been talked about a lot. The hall often says they're here to tell my story. Well, I'm here to tell you too, you are my greatest accomplishments. When I get called home to heaven one day, if all they talk about is this gold jacket, my career, then I failed miserably as a father, a husband, and a friend. You two are my legacy. You are both so talented, and I cannot wait to see what you decide to do and to conquer this world. So always put Christ first, find your why, dream big dreams, and always pursue greatness in whatever you do. Thank you all, and may God bless you all.
Like, I want to go do something right now. I don't know what, but I'm like, let's go, Jared, let's go. Like, man, I'm ready to go. So what is he saying? Essentially, right? Everything temporary is meaningless. He understands that. He doesn't want to stand before God and know that he just was chasing around the wind with a plastic bag. He wants to know that he invested in the future, that he did what mattered, that he gave his life, that he poured out the last drop in good ways. He wanted to ground it, his purpose in what lasts. So this stuff is very real to me. So I just want to let you know, I'll close with this. Like, this is like very real for my family and I. So this today, after third service, we are going to leave because we believe in this and we orient our time and our resources around this kind of stuff. So when my daughter Asher turned 13, a couple of years before that, I started reading and thinking, like, man, like, what are we going to do? Like, our culture doesn't have anything to like help women go into womanhood or like help young men like step into manhood. Like, what are we going to do for our kids? So I began listening and researching and reading and like doing all this stuff, trying to get my head around this. So after 3 years ago, we took her on a coming of age trip where Brittany and I did different things with her over a course of 3 days, just to pour into her, like, you know, what does a woman of God look like? What's important? Like all these things that you're gonna feel like you have to be defined by, they don't define you. So we grounded it in Scripture the whole trip, and we grounded it in doing things that were scary, and grounded it in things that were hard, and we we try to teach real life lessons through these things that we were doing. And this afternoon, we're taking Bear out of town. We're going to do the same thing. And so when we thought about doing this, like, man, what's scary? I'm like, what's the biggest zip line that like is in all of New England? Like, let's go on that. What's going to make me feel like I'm going to fall off the earth if this thing doesn't make it? Like, let's do that, because, with God, you're going to be called to do scary things, and you can do them. And then the next day, Bear and I are going to hike a 4,000 footer, because it's like you're going to do some tough stuff in life, and it's going to be hard, and sometimes it's going to be long, and God's going to bring you to these mountains, and it's going to take us 6 or more hours to hike this whole thing, but you can do it. You can do it. And so we're going to tie that into Scripture. We're going to do all these things. And then Brittany, because she's a cool mom, day 3 is going to take them like on these UTVs, and they're going to go like ripping through the mountains on this thing, right? And it's like, because again, we want to have some kind of thing where we're saying, let's invest long term. Let's help our kids think long term. And the things that are in this life that want to identify you and force that identity on you, we want you to be strong enough to say, no, that's not who I am. I'm more than that. I'm a child of God. Those are the kind of things that we're doing. I want you to know this is not just theory for me. This is like how we're orienting our lives. And so this last one, A Horse and Chariot, this is an account I follow on Instagram. They have some good stuff occasionally. He says, don't be dragged through life by wild passions, but be moved with purpose, with strength and joy, ever closer to the heart of God. Like, that's the direction. That's the orientation I want for my life, for my kids' lives, for your lives. Like, man, I want to orient us towards something that matters. And we can look back and say, man, I poured out every last drop for stuff that's going to last, not just my own pleasure. So for the car ride, here's another challenge for you. For the car ride, ask, question, a couple things to ask, a couple things to do. Where am I trying to find my identity right now? Is it grounded in anything that's going to last? And then something to do. Name the false identity. Give that to God and say, Lord, I need help putting this down. I realize through prayer, through thinking, through talking, man, I gotta put this down. That's the beauty of following Jesus. He helps you with that. Ask, am I living with an under the sun mentality? Like, am I just a limited person chasing the wind, my little plastic bag? And then last, invest in what lasts. People, truth, the gospel. That stuff matters. Next week, we'll talk about community, closely related to what we're talking about today. Why is it so hard? Because it's full of people. Spoiler. But it matters. Let me pray. Lord, I thank you for today. Thank you so much for your word. It's powerful. I thank you for these examples of these guys who love you, who, much like Solomon, they've done it all. But they've got good perspective. Help us to have an eternal perspective, Jesus. I give you everybody here, everybody listening, and I pray that in your name, Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen. God bless you all. Have a great week.